A very good day to everybody listening to my talk. My name is Barbara Hofer. I am speaking to you from South Tyrol, Italy. The title of my presentation is Languages in Contact, Multilingualism in the Trilingual Border Region of South Tyrol. I begin with a brief introduction about the language situation and the history of the region, relate them to the decisions taken at the level of education. I then briefly talk about the school system in the area and present some selected results from 2 studies into multilingual competences, and I conclude with an outlook. South Tyrol is located to the north of Italy, bordering on Austria and Switzerland. It used to be a German-speaking, or it is a German-speaking region. Majority of the population are German speakers. It used to be part of the Habsburg monarchy, was then annexed by Italy in the aftermath of World War I in 1919. South Tyrol is a trilingual province. Multilingualism is very much a social reality. Paradoxically, however, it is not sufficiently accounted for in the educational context. We have language separation at all levels, separate school boards, separate language schools for the different language communities, and languages are typically taught separately in a strictly compartmentalized fashion, at least in German language schools, as I will explain shortly. The sociolinguistic and political context is a highly complex one. We have 3 linguistic groups living together: the majority group, the German-speaking group, the smallest community is the Ladin group with only about 20,000 speakers, and we have a community of Italian language speakers of about 115,000. After World War I, the region, as I said before, was annexed by Italy, and during the fascist period, the German language was banned from all public institutions, including schools. There was very limited, if any at all, German language teaching in so-called secret catacomb schools. Also, there was an Italianization program put in place by the fascist regime. Italian workers were relocated from other regions, and the aim was to Italianize the region and assimilate the South Tyrolese. All of that explains a little bit, at least, the situation, the context today. There's still quite a lot of skepticism and apprehension vis-a-vis the language of the other, the language of the enemy, as it is sometimes even called. There's a fear that too much contact with the language of the other could lead to a loss of the L1, the German language, and the German identity. Fostering multilingualism is therefore seen in part, at least, as a risky undertaking, something that might weaken the German language community and German culture. In German language schools, we have an ideology of German first, which means that German language schools typically try to keep classrooms as Germanophone as possible, and there's a strong emphasis on fostering German and German language and culture. So that is the situation in German language schools. It looks a bit or quite different in Italian language schools and also in Latin schools, where there is much more emphasis on multilingual education, on fostering multilingualism, on potentiated L2 teaching, on CLIL with German and Italian and also English in parts. So that goes to show that while the German language system is very much anchored in a monolingual attractor state or habitus, Italian and Latin schools are very much or much more committed to promoting multilingualism and multilingual competences. In Italian language schools, we have already at the primary level what we call potenziamento lingue, so CLIL, content and language integrated learning in German and Italian, and English is taught as L3 from first grade. We also have in some classes or some schools a so-called language awareness class anchored in the curriculum, a class where children are very much encouraged to reflect on language, across languages. The focus is on cross-linguistic comparison, contrastive analysis, and pupils are encouraged to pay attention to structural, functional aspects of language in their L1, but also in additional languages. In Latin schools, we have a system at the primary level, a system of rotation, of alternate weeks of teaching in German, Italian, and Latin, and English is always taught as an L4. At the upper secondary level, we have a system of parity, language parity, whereby German and Italian have equal weight. Subjects are taught in German and Italian to about different similar degrees, and Latin is used as a bridge language and is taught as in the form of language art lessons for 2 hours every week. So in the Latin and in the Italian system, we have a situation whereby pupils, students are very much made to feel that they are competent multilingual learners, and they are not made to feel deficient, and there's an explicit focus on multilingual learning and multilingual competency. In German language schools, that is not typically the case, but we have 2 good practice examples, 2 schools that also took part in one of the studies that I will be presenting in a moment. One of the schools is the Bachlechner Primary School, where the 3 languages are introduced in 1st grade. The children gain literacy experience in all 3 languages from the beginning. There is a so-called multilingual learning session twice a week for 2 hours. Children in that lesson or session work with and across their 3 curricular languages, and there is an explicit focus on meta and cross-linguistic learning and awareness. And also there's a color-based system in place to help children distinguish and keep the languages apart. The second school is the Langer Primary. There too is literacy development in all 3 languages from the outset. There's cross-lingual strategy training also from 1st grade onwards, and parallel bilingual alphabetization in Italian and German. So multilingualism is very much in these schools considered as beneficial, and benefits is also what we found in several research projects, 2 of which I will present in the following. The first study I will be talking about is a study conducted in German language schools, 10 German language schools in different sociolinguistic and educational contexts in South Tyrol. And what we looked out for was multilingual task performance in different cohorts, children in multilingual education and children in monolingual education. Overall, there were 209 children taking part in the study. All the children were in their 5th grades, and they were all multilingual in the sense that they studied 3 languages. However, they engaged, as I said before, in multilingual routines to different degrees depending on the sociolinguistic and socio-educational context in which they were nested. I skipped this part, but the main focus of the study was how the children performed in a multilingual competence test, how well they could operate across languages, how skilled they were at mobilizing and applying their prior knowledge and their understanding of language in general. The test procedure was such that we applied a series of questionnaires and language tests, and the most prominent, the one that I will be talking about, the multilingual competence test. we also conducted interviews with some of the children. These are some examples from the test that we administered. Children had to reflect across languages, had to make connections, find similarities between languages, and so there was a linguistic component, but also a meta-linguistic component in which the children had to explain how they arrived at the conclusion. So they had to verbalize their meta-cognitive, meta-linguistic thinking. I skipped this part in order to not go beyond the time limit. What we found was significant advantages for the children in the multilingual programs. Groups 4 and 5, as you can see in the graph, performed significantly better than the children in the monolingual programs, Group 1 being the most monolingual. The results were are corroborated or corroborate earlier results from a study that we conducted in Italian language schools, and there too we found significant advantages for children in multilingual programs. The children back then also showed higher metalinguistic awareness, attained better results in L1, L2 and L3, and they also exhibited a range of abilities, skills that we can subsume under the heading multi-competence. So there were several, in both studies, advantages that we found, advantages at the cognitive level, linguistic level, also at the language of learning, behavior and motivation, and also institutional level. For example, we found that teachers, staff had greater valorization, a more open mindset towards integrated multilingual learning. They had a better understanding of what multilingual means, that it comes with asymmetrical competences, for example. So an overall very positive, very promising picture. Given these positive outcomes and given that multilingual education does come with benefits, the question that we ask is, why not foster multilingual education on a larger scale in South Tyrol? Why not implement a Latin style or Italian style model, or a multilingual model such as implemented at the Lange and Bachlechner School in other German language schools? That is what we recommend, what we would frame as a desideratum for the future of South Tyrol. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.